do a short presentation now on the technology behind real-time personalization. Real quickly about me, my name is Dave Sawyer. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at FFW. FFW is a full-service digital agency. We're the largest Drupal agency in the world. Our portfolio of clients includes Pfizer, NBC, Stanford University, and others. We have 420 employees worldwide. Real quickly, the agenda today is to discuss what real-time personalization is, talk about the components of a personalization solution on Drupal. We'll review a few Drupal modules that can be used today, particularly for Drupal 7 sites. We'll also talk about a solution approach for Drupal 8. And finally, we'll look at some system integrations with third-party services that can help you to implement personalization on Drupal. So what is real-time personalization? First of all, personalization itself we would define as tailoring an experience to the interests and needs of an individual user. Personalization itself has been around for a long time, so what's new is this idea of real-time personalization, which has to do with automatically identifying site visitors based on various criteria and serving targeted variations of content to each audience segment in real time, typically using some personalization platform or piece of technology that's managing that. So really it has to do with the idea of building a profile about the user using any and all information that is available. And typically all visitors to a site will start out as completely anonymous. And using automatically detected criteria, we can start to build this profile in the background, using things like what referral URL brought them there, or what browser and device they're using, or the IP address that they're coming from to determine their approximate geographic location, or the click path that they're going through on the site. And any and all of this information can be gathered together and stored in this user profile. And the idea is to move from a completely anonymous first-time visitor to an anonymous repeat visitor who we know a little bit more about, and ultimately to a known visitor. And typically, this technology that's facilitating this sits in parallel to the Drupal stack. So normally we would have a Drupal stack with a Drupal database and PHP and all of the components, and there would be a separate piece running in the background or in parallel to the Drupal stack. And by doing this, we externalize the personalization solution. And this is helpful because a personalization solution where we're tracking activity for anonymous visitors involves lots of database reads and writes for anonymous visitors. This introduces performance challenges and overhead. So by externalizing this, we're able to mitigate some of the performance issues, and also we're able to use that anonymous user profile on multiple sites or applications. Typically, this is working through enabling JavaScript communications between the Drupal site and the external service, which are essentially pushing data from the Drupal site to the third-party service in the background as the user is browsing or interacting with the application. So let's talk about some Drupal solutions of how to do this. First of all, the approach to implement personalization really does vary a lot, depending on if you're using Drupal 7 or Drupal 8. But the name of the game for both Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 has a lot to do with taxonomy and metadata. In other words, structured content is key. It's essential for a personalization solution. In Drupal speak, I'm talking about the use of taxonomy vocabularies to describe the content. But I'm not just talking about the traditional use of taxonomy. In other words, not just topics, tags, or categories that describe the subject matter. I'm talking about topics, tags, or categories that describe the content from a marketing perspective, from a business objective perspective. Here are a few examples. These would be taxonomy vocabularies that would not be showing up outward-facing to the customer. These would be showing up internally to the marketing manager or content editor. Imagine tagging content, like a blog post, with a persona vocabulary. In other words, describing who or what type of person the content is intended to be read by. Or a customer level vocabulary, where you're tagging the content, describing the type of customer that should be reading this content. For example, new customers versus existing customers. Or a taxonomy vocabulary for a buying process step, to describe the purchase life cycle step or buying process step of where in the purchase life cycle a potential customer would be when they're reading this content. And this all has to do with how you're targeting your content to customers at different stages of a buying process. Something else which I call content subtype, which would be the idea of extending on a basic content type and further describing the nature of it. So an example would be a blog. A lot of websites for corporations have blogs. In Drupal, all of the blog posts might use the blog content type, but not all blog posts are the same. Some blog posts are short updates, some are Q&A format. So the idea is to have a taxonomy vocabulary to describe the nature or format of the content. And finally, content lifespan. Tagging content to determine the difference between something that is time-sensitive or timely in nature that might not be relevant after a period of time, relative to something that's a little bit more evergreen or something that would last a long time and could be used and targeted over a period of time in a personalization strategy. In terms of Drupal, as we said, most solutions today involve the use of a third-party service to externalize the personalization technology. Some examples are shown here. Let's take a look at a few Drupal modules that you can use to integrate a personalization solution. First of all, if you are using Drupal 7, there's a module called Personalization, which provides a great framework for a proof of concept or a prototype approach. It's really easy to use. You download it and install it, and basically it gives you a couple options, one of which is the ability to determine the user's location. And then based on the user's location, map their location to content that would be relevant for them. So after you've determined their geographic location, you would have tags in the taxonomy vocabulary that are associated with different geographic regions that you want to target content to. It also provides a way to map taxonomy to subject matter. In other words, as a user is browsing pages on your site that are all tagged with a topic, for example, pages tagged with baseball, the Drupal site would know that based on that anonymous user profile, you want to recommend or display a block of other content that is tagged with baseball. It provides a customizable scoring algorithm and really just a great way to install something, get up and running, and start to experiment with how you could implement a personalization solution on Drupal 7. It sets a cookie on the user in the background with a unique ID. And here's an example of a taxonomy vocabulary that's been configured in Drupal 7 for the use of this module. Another Drupal 7 module that you can use is called Personalize, similar title. This one is more ideally suited to a more advanced or complex solution for personalization on Drupal. It's developed and maintained by Acquia, and it uses what is called a decision agent approach to define criteria for automatically serving the most relevant version of content. Let's take a look at what that one looks like. Unlike the last module, this one is actually a collection of modules that you can enable, the different pieces of functionality that you need. And when you install and enable it, you'll see that the Drupal site structure menu provides some new options for you to configure your personalization campaign. And in this example, what we're showing here is a variation set, a really simple example where we have two blocks. This example would be for a travel company, for example, who wants to promote two different tours or travel packages, one for Paris and one for New York. And so the idea here is that by automatically detecting the user's geographic location, you can display the block that's most relevant to that particular user. Perhaps users in North America see the block for New York travel package, and perhaps users in Europe see the block for the Paris travel package. It provides a UI for configuring what's essentially is a personalization campaign that you can enable or disable at any time. And it uses a what, who, when approach. In other words, what content should be personalized, who or what members of the audience should see it, and when the content personalization should run. Again, a very simple framework for configuring personalization within Drupal. Here we see a configuration of a personalization strategy based on URL parameters. In other words, based on a parameter in the URL, a block would show one way or the other. So, before we get into third-party services, a quick comment about Drupal 8. The modules I've just shown are currently not available for Drupal 8, and there's no roadmap available for Drupal 8 at the moment. So a personalization solution on Drupal 8 is going to involve, at this point in time, a little bit of custom development. But again, regardless of use of Drupal 7 or Drupal 8, the name of the game is highly structured content, taxonomy and metadata, and then using that taxonomy and metadata to inform how content should be tailored and targeted. Third-party services in the marketplace today that allow you to implement personalization on Drupal include Acquia Lift. Acquia Lift provides that whole externalized user profile that we've just discussed. It allows you to implement personalization cross-channel, so on lots of different websites and across different channels. And it runs alongside your Drupal site or multiple sites. Other solutions in the marketplace include Optimize Them. This one doesn't provide integration with the Drupal API as much as Acquia Lift does. However, it uses a similar approach where we're using JavaScript to embed in the Drupal site to communicate back to the external service, which is maintaining user profiles. Similarly, Evergage, another product which will allow you to implement personalization and targeting on Drupal. Similar approach based on JavaScript embedding in the Drupal pages. And in both of these last two cases, you're logging into a separate web GUI outside of Drupal to configure how your content would be targeted. So in short, the name of the game is highly structured content. Drupal really is, in my opinion, the best CMS for implementing personalization because it's really excellent at managing structured content with taxonomy and fieldable entities, etc. I gave a presentation here at DrupalCon, which was recorded. So if you want to see a little bit of a deeper dive into this and learn a little more about the strategy associated and the prerequisites to going into a personalization strategy, you can see the recording of this session up on the DrupalCon website. It was called Web Personalization for Drupal, Your Roadmap to Get Started.